Around the world, left-wing politicians and parties are having a tough time. In the UK, Keir Starmer's Labour government have suffered the sharpest first-year poll decline since polling began, and are now something like 10 points behind Reform. In America, having lost the Senate, House, and presidency to the Republicans last year, the Democrats have since seen their favourability ratings fall to all-time lows. And in Germany, early this year, Olaf Scholz's Social Democrats suffered their worst result since the 1880s, winning just 16% of the vote. However, one country that's apparently bucking the trend is Mexico. Since 2018, Mexican politics has been dominated by Morena, a left-wing party founded by Andrés Manuel López Obrador, commonly known as AMLO. AMLO served as president between 2018 and 2024, during which time he enjoyed consistently high approval ratings and pushed through a series of impressive left-wing reforms. Filling AMLO's shoes always looked to be a daunting task, but his successor, President Claudia Sheinbaum, has so far done a pretty good job of it. She dominated at last year's general election, and her approval ratings have since fluctuated between 70 and 85%, even better than AMLO. These are the sorts of numbers that Starmer, Scholz, and the Democrats could only dream of. So in this video, we thought we'd try and figure out why the left is doing so well in Mexico, and what other left-wingers might learn from Morena's success. Could you rank every single politician in the world? Hear our thoughts and argue with us on our podcast, the World Leader Leaderboard. Find it on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. So, let's get straight into it. The first thing that Morena can teach the global left regards the importance of a good media strategy. Other left-wing parties, especially in the West, really struggle on this front. In the US, the Democrats are flailing in Trump's flood of outlandish ideas, while despite literally being in government, Keir Starmer's media strategy apparently amounts to tweeting out ChatGPT platitudes in response to whatever Nigel Farage has just said. Conversely, Morena has been remarkably successful in dominating the news cycle since AMLO came to power in 2018. The cornerstone of Morena's communication strategy is the Mananeras, a multi-hour press conference that kicks off at about 7 a.m. every working day. The Mananeras was pioneered by AMLO, and at the time, many commentators chalked its apparent success down to his personality. AMLO is a rambunctious rhetorician, and thus often described by the international press as a populist, who would spend much of any Mananera attacking the media and other Mexican elites for being corrupt or not giving Morena a fair hearing. The Mananeras were incredibly popular though, with an average viewership of about 10 million people, which allowed AMLO to circumvent the media and get his side of the story across. The press would then spend the rest of each day playing catch-up, trying to respond to whatever AMLO had just accused them of. However, despite being far less rambunctious than her predecessor, Sheinbaum's Mananeras have still been a real hit. While they're generally less combative and a bit more concise, Sheinbaum's Mananeras have nonetheless allowed her to showcase the government's achievements and convince Mexicans that the government is actually trying to do things. Now, to be clear, Morena's Mananeras aren't perfect. Friendly journalists get preferential treatment, and AMLO used them to do some pretty questionable things, including revealing the salary of an anti-corruption campaigner and the personal phone number of a New York Times journalist. Nonetheless, their success should serve as a reminder that left-wing ideas can be pretty popular, if you communicate them well. Anyway, the second thing that might be of interest to left-wing parties is that when it comes to economic policy, Morena focuses less on redistributive policies, i.e. policies that involve taxing the rich and then redistributing their proceeds to the poor, and more on what are sometimes known as pre-distributive policies. In other words, policies that reduce inequality without direct taxation and redistribution, usually by increasing wages. One of Morena's first big policy achievements, for instance, was a package of labour laws that, among other things, limited outsourcing, obliged employers to pay annual profit share bonuses, and perhaps most notably, increased the minimum wage by about 20%, with similar increases in subsequent years. Even accounting for inflation, the minimum wage rose by 90% between 2018 and 2024, helping to lift more than 5 million Mexicans out of poverty and creating a sense among poorer Mexicans that the economy was working for them, even when headline GDP growth was meager. This focus on pre-distributive policies rather than redistributive policies is popular with Morena's working class base. An MBER paper from 2023, for instance, found that while highly educated voters like redistributive policies, less well-educated, and therefore in the aggregate more working-class voters, generally prefer the pre-distributive ones. Furthermore, because pre-distributive policies don't require the government to actually dish out cash, this has helped Mexico keep its public finances in order. Mexico's debt to GDP has actually fallen steadily since the pandemic, and is now, astonishingly, below where it was when AMLO took charge in 2018. This speaks to another interesting way in which Morena differs from other left-wing parties. They prefer a small state, and public spending accounts for just 29% of GDP, far lower than most similar countries. This is all part of what AMLO calls Republican austerity. He basically believes that the state is intrinsically wasteful, and thus ruthlessly cuts civil servant perks and salaries, including his own, while keeping a lid on overall spending. While the tax intake has increased in the past couple of years, this is mostly due to a successful crackdown on tax evasion, as opposed to any big increases in headline taxes, and new spending is generally paid for by cuts elsewhere. Morena's eye-catching infrastructure projects, for instance, like Tren Maya, are also partially built by the army. Morena also differs from other left-wing parties on cultural issues. In short, Morena are relatively socially conservative, and AMLO has in the past argued that what he calls vibes progressives, in other words nominal left-wingers who are singularly focused on identity politics, often overlook the fundamental cause of left-wing politics, namely economic inequality. Conversely, other left-wing parties, especially in the West, have drifted to the left on social issues in recent decades, creating what political economist Lorenz Günther calls a representation gap between the political class and ordinary voters, who are generally more right-wing on cultural issues. Now, of course, these policies can't easily be copied and pasted onto other countries. The Mexican public, for instance, are more socially conservative and debt-averse than most, a consequence of Mexico's troubled history with debt crises. And the Mexican state had a lot of fat to cut when AMLO took charge. It's also easier for Morena to present itself as an anti-establishment movement, given that they emerged in the 2010s as a fresh-faced alternative to a discredited two-party duopoly. And at least some of the success of the Mananeras is a function of AMLO and Sheinbaum's personal charisma. It's not hard to imagine a Starmer or Biden-led Mananera backfiring spectacularly. Nonetheless, Morena's success at least shows that left-wing politics can still work, and other aspiring left-wingers would be wise to take note. Ultimately, we live in a world where growing geopolitical and economic issues like this are hitting the headlines every day. And while it's easy to sometimes feel overwhelmed, there are ways to stay sharp. And we know that the easiest way to do this is with Brilliant. That's because Brilliant teaches you by doing, using active learning techniques to train you in the principles behind otherwise complex subjects, and ensuring you actually understand what's going on. With their ever-growing collection of lessons in topics ranging from maths to science to AI, there's plenty to get you started. Not only does each lesson offer a comprehensive mix of engaging problems and competitive features, but Brilliant also helps you stay consistent, keeping you motivated and excited to learn every single day. Take their newly updated science courses, for example. Here you can learn how to build simple computers out of logic gates, or open your eyes to the world around you by solving puzzles with science. Each lesson will help you to develop your scientific intuition through visual, interactive problem solving that gets you hands-on with key concepts. Try Brilliant for free and start your learning journey today by visiting brilliant.org/TLDR, scanning the QR code on screen, or clicking the link in the description. By doing so, you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription, and they'll know you came from us, which really helps us out.